Double Indemnity is the 1944 Billy Wilder classic film noir. It was a smash hit at the Academy Awards, but more importantly, it is regarded as one of the greatest film noirs ever made, with some of the greatest performances in probably the history of the film noir genre. We're going to talk about it on our 30th episode of the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Yes, it is episode 30. I am joined by my co-host, not guest host, Shane Mulvaney.
How are you doing, everyone? How are we doing, right?
Yeah, very good, thanks. As far as recording goes, I feel like we took a little bit of a break there. You probably wouldn't have even noticed it at home because we recorded a few episodes in advance. It is safe to say I was away in Florida. I was planning on getting so much content filmed, and I was planning on going to Barnes & Noble for the first time and filming it and buying lots of Criterions, and Orlando emptied my bank account in a week. So I didn't get to do any of that stuff. I am so broke. So very broke. But that being said, we still managed to put out a fairly successful, it's safe to say, video this week from you, Shane. Besides that, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. Pretty busy at work, but sure, we'll crack into Noir-vember here. It's been going well in the podcast so far. A couple of successful episodes, I think. So I think this is certainly one of the most famous noirs of all time for so many reasons. And yeah, I'm expecting this to do good numbers as well, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a favourite of both of ours, and I feel like it's a favourite of most people's. It's the second time we've covered Billy Wilder on the podcast, and I'd urge you to watch the Stalag 17 episode. It's one of our least watched episodes ever, and like Shane does a full-on deep dive into Billy Wilder, which is really interesting. So I would urge you all to watch our Stalag 17 episode if you're a fan of Billy Wilder after you watch this episode, because yes, we are talking about Double Indemnity. I reckon at the end of the episode we'll talk about what films we've watched recently, but in the meantime, Shane, why don't you give us a spoiler-free review of the film?
This is just an absolute stone cold masterpiece from the man, the myth, the legend, Billy Wilder. Everyone, like I've said on the Stalag 17 episode that you can go back and I watched that, Harry said that he's my favourite writer-director of all time. So someone who wrote and directed all of his films. It's just so many quotable lines of dialogue. The characters are just insanely great. The casting is amazing. Like Phyllis Dietrichson, so Barbara Stanwyck as Phyllis Dietrichson. There has never been a better femme fatale in film noir than her. Like there's a lot of great femme fatales, but to me, no one's better than Phyllis Dietrichson. She is literally the epitome of what that role, what that kind of stereotype, what that she's the embodiment of femme fatale for so many reasons. Fred MacMurray, his casting wasn't actually. A lot of people were kind of skeptical because he was kind of known for romantic films and he's kind of known for comedies at the time. So a lot of people were perplexed as to why he would be cast in this, but he has the absolutely perfect film noir voice. It's deep, it's booming,
he's class, yeah.
He's so good, and he's playing a role where the character he's playing thinks he's more in control than he actually is. He thinks he's so much smarter than what he actually is. And he absolutely nails that kind of that depiction. The structure of this is amazing. Like the film lays all of its cards on the table for you within the first 5 minutes.
Isn't something that they do in the book. That was just the film that did that. So the film starts off in the present day and then flashes back to the events of the film. That doesn't happen in the book. The book is totally linear. So it's really interesting that they went that route.
And it's like, in a way, it probably shouldn't work, or at least it's a very, very big risk for it to work, because you're giving away everything in the first 5 minutes. I mean, to say everything, they do go on to explain, there are some twists and turns, but for the most part, they are just giving you the actual ending at the very start of the film. But it works so well because of the writing from Billy Wilder and not Charles Berger.
I'm not sure where I'm going to edit this, but in case you can't tell, Shane's dog is barking at the minute. So I'll just jump in there and say two other things. One, epitome?
Epitome.
Epitome.
Yeah, that's it, yes.
And secondly, Edward G Robinson is in this film, Little Caesar himself. and he is class. He is a class actor anyway. I've seen him in a couple of films. He's probably most famous for Little Caesar. He's an absolute legend of cinema. But some of his line delivery, some of his lines, which obviously you can't attribute to him, his character in general is so interesting, and it's very rare. I feel like we had a character similar to this in Shadow of a Doubt, but it's very rare where you have a character who's just so intelligent and just gets everything right all the time. Like they actually are as good at working things out as you think. Like normally for narrative purposes, even the really clever characters miss a beat or they don't catch on to everything. But no, he throughout the film, doesn't matter what it is, he catches on to it. He's such a clever character, which is just really interesting to see because obviously you're almost writing yourself into a corner by writing a guy who just gets everything right all the time, but it still works. He's just such an endearing character, and as I said, Edward G Robinson himself is just an absolute legend. Love that guy, and I think his performance in this film is spectacular.
Yeah, I love his performance. It's brilliant. I love the relationship that he has between Walter and Keys. But yeah, my dog has stopped barking now. Shout out to Molly. So I'll jump back in with the point I was making. So Wilder's usual collaborator at the time was Charles Brackett. He would stop working with him after Sunset Boulevard. But anyway, that's a whole other story. But at this point in time, his Charles Brackett was his usual collaborator. And they worked on scripts that Wilder didn't even direct. So they had a really, really strong working relationship. But Brackett wasn't really interested in the material. And Raymond Chandler was a very acclaimed novelist at the time. So he came on board to write the screenplay with Wilder, and they didn't really get on at all. They weren't each other's cup of tea. It's a saying we say over here in Ireland. They just did not get on at all. But you wouldn't know from the screenplay at all because it's so good. Yeah, like I said, it lays all of its cards on the table. It shouldn't work this structure, but it absolutely does. It's an absolute bona fide, whatever way you want to put it, where you want to pronounce it. Classic film noir.
Yeah, I would agree. To keep it kind of short and sweet, I fell in love with this movie the first time I've seen it. I've seen it a few times now. It's, without spoiling my review or anything, it is, for me, one of the best films of the entire decade of the 1940s. It is more or less a perfect movie, genuinely. If you haven't seen it, you gotta watch it, and I reckon we get on into it. So
couple of quick things I want to point out. Sorry, just to jump in very, very quickly. Fred MacMurray and Barbara Stanwyck, it's not the first time they worked together. So they were in a rom-com that I saw, a Christmas rom-com actually, called Remember the Night. Kind of fun. Yeah, it's kind of breezy. It's an interesting watch, but again, it's not necessarily a must watch or anything like that. But this is the second film they worked on together, and it's completely different, the characters that they would play. They did work together 4 times, by the way, so they had one of those kind of really acclaimed kind of on-screen relationships. They just had great chemistry, and never more apparent than in this film. So I just wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, because, interestingly, on that point, Barbara Stanwyck actually said early on in the filming that she wasn't comfortable playing like a stone cold killer character. She wasn't comfortable playing such a malicious character, to which Billy Wilder said, "Are you a mouse or an actress?"
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, I think I'm an actress." And he was like, "Well, then get on stage." And she said that's like one of the best pieces of advice anyone's ever given her. Because, yeah, as you said, her performance is like the quintessential femme fatale performance. It's amazing. She is so unbelievably class in this film. But like, everyone is. It's crazy. Everyone's so good in this. Everyone is.
Yeah, no, like there are so many great femme fatales and so many great femme fatale performances. But I just think she is the benchmark. Like, I really think everyone is compared to her rather than her being compared to someone else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so I'll just get straight into it. Walter Neff, played by Fred MacMurray. We see him drive in the middle of the night back to his workplace, of all places, in the middle of the night. It's an insurance company. And on the way in, he actually meets this old janitor who's quite friendly to him as he gets in the lift. And he goes up the lift and he goes into his office and he sits down. As I said, this isn't in the book. This is all Wilder. And he sits down in his office and he picks up a recording device and he just confesses to committing murder. Pretty cold open, guys. He confesses to, at this time, unknown man named Keyes that he committed murder. And as we said in the Stalag 17 episode, we're going to really not do the writing of this justice.
No.
Like,
you can't.
Take everything we say, but then just imagine it's like way better, pretty much. Like, it's so hard to actually talk about a Billy Wilder film with his writing style and do it justice because, like, every single line is quotable. So it's not like other films where you have a few quotes and you name them and it's class. It's like, it's so hard to actually keep up with everything that they're saying when it comes to taking down quotes. So yeah, don't expect an insane amount of quotes in here because like more or less every line in the film is quotable. So it's actually so hard to filter out what ones to even mention on the podcast. But it's worth mentioning what he says in the beginning. He committed murder. He killed a man. He did it for money and for a woman, and he didn't get the money, and he didn't get the woman. It's so good. Unknowingly, because noir was a fairly new genre at the time. It hadn't even been called film noir yet. That was a couple of years later. It is retroactively like the perfect writing for a noir. I think Billy Wilder and the film noir genre, I wish he did it more. I know he did Sunset Boulevard as well, but I just wish he made more noirs because his witty writing style lends itself to this genre so much. But basically he said that Keyes was right all along. We don't really know what that means just yet. And he murdered a man under the name of Dietrichson. And then we get him basically recounting what happened, and that's more or less then sets us off for the rest of the movie. We come back to present day a couple of times, but that's more just so Wilder can get a couple more one-liners in more than anything, because the way that Fred MacMurray's character Walter Neff talks is just so cool.
He just has the voice. Like there are actors more synonymous with film noir. But like that voice, I just cannot, like, it's just the perfect voice. It's just perfectly pitched. But yeah, he says that he went to go and visit Mr. Dietrichson because he needed to see him about an auto renewal policy. He wasn't there, but Mrs. Dietrichson was. She's wearing just a towel when he first meets her. She's at the top of the staircase and he's at the door, and you can see instantly he's like head over heels for this woman. Like he's obsessed
from the get-go, and he says it in his narration.
Yeah, he does. He says he says that he's taken her instantly, and he makes a fully covered joke, which is interesting because he says fully covered, meaning it's like a double entendre, meaning insurance, and obviously that she's not wearing that much. But yeah, then he says that he was only thinking of that dame upstairs. So yeah, he leaves, and so he doesn't leave. They get talking on the couch a little while later when she is dressed, and he comments on her anklet. So this is an interesting thing as well, because apparently at the time wearing an anklet was kind of a sign to men, if you can believe it. I don't know if I do or not, but anyway, if you can believe it, if a woman had her anklet on and she would let a man see it, that means that she was sexually available. No, I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah.
That's like the context that scene is.
I'm sure if you're wrong, someone will let us know.
Yeah. If I am wrong, again, I'm not sure I believe it myself, so I'm not saying that that's a fact, people, but it's a theory that's out there, or people are saying it, that's true. But yeah, she says, can you do accident insurance? He says he does. So then they start to flirt more, and there's just an amazing scene. Scene. The dialogue...
I was going to say, the dialogue in this scene is like borderline impossible to keep up with if you're trying to write it down. It revolves around... hooked.
It just revolves around the word suppose. So they're throwing out a bunch of hypotheticals out there. And it's not even worth me going through them because I will never ever do it justice on my best day. But like, watch this scene. It's some of the best writing you'll see. It's just so good. Oh man, Billy Wilder. I love that guy. So yeah, he says that I'm going to come back the following evening at 8:30 because Mr. Dietrichson will be in then, and we can get this insurance business sorted then.
Yeah. Yeah, and he says, even as he's leaving in his narration, that he's more or less already obsessed with the woman. And she sends him on his way anyway, and he goes back to work, and we see Keyes for the first time in the film. It is Edward G. Robinson's character, Barton Keyes. He is the claims manager of the place. He doesn't own it, but he's essentially the number one. Yeah. And he kind of treats Walter Neff as his number two. There's clearly, they have a great relationship and it's very well written, but there's definitely an underlying, almost overlying respect between the two. And it's really interesting because often in these situations, obviously this is before this would happen in film, but often in film, you get like a J. Jonah Jameson character who kind of just talks down to everybody and everybody's a fool, and because he's the guy who figures everything out. But it's really interesting that Barton Keyes is the guy who figures everything out, and he thinks all his staff are idiots. But he does think that Walter Neff is a top salesman, a clever guy, and he comes to him with a lot of his problems.
He essentially has... Sorry, go on.
We see him in action. We see him in action basically in seconds tear apart this guy's claim about his truck catching fire. And he thanks the little man inside him, which I believe is called Heartburn, for his sense, his spider sense almost. Too many Spider-Man references. But basically he has this sense that he calls the little man inside him. And whenever he gets this sense, he's always right. And that sense comes around when he thinks that someone's making a claim and they're trying to scam them out of money. And with this guy, he sees through it in seconds. So just like that, obviously, we know, with the beginning, that Keyes knew everything all along. So chances are, you're going to have to come up with a pretty good plan to get past this Keyes fella. Because, he admits it himself. He's a total over-analyst. He left his wife because he didn't like her character one day.
Not his wife.
He couldn't see through
it. He was supposed to get married.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
He called off the marriage because he just couldn't get past the little details that, like...
Yeah. He's a total over-analyst, and Walter slags him about it, and he takes the slagging. So, yeah, it's safe to say that they definitely respect each other.
Yeah, 100%. He actually tells Keyes that he loves him, so they have quite the bromance going on. But he also reiterates this in his voiceover. He's basically, because the voiceover is a voice memo that he's recording in Keyes' office to Keyes. So that's that's the whole thing about that. But then Walter says he cancelled a few big appointments that he had. Basically, Mrs. Dietrichson had cancelled the 8:30 appointment the following evening that they had set up. So she said, look, can you come tomorrow afternoon instead? He'll be home then. And he had a bunch of meetings that would probably have gotten him quite a lot of money if he had closed the deals. But he just cancelled all of them because he just wanted to see her. He just needed to see her. So he rearranged that. And then when he gets back to the house, they flirt more. And she says that she wants Walter to take out accident insurance, or to facilitate accident insurance for her husband, because he does quite dangerous work, heavy labour. Even though he's a high-level manager, he's an owner of the place. He actually gets down and dirty with his employees. And she says that, look, if anything was to happen, at least I know he's protected. And Walter says, well, I could pay out $50,000 in the event of a death, like, straight away. No questions asked. And Phyllis then says, is there any chance you can take it out without him knowing? I don't think he'll actually go for it, and I just want to make sure he's protected. And Walter straight away sees right through.
Yeah, absolutely. Because she also slips into the conversation as well. She's like, but don't you get commission? Yeah. So it's clearly she is trying to twist his arm there.
She's trying to coerce him, and she's trying to like, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that she isn't as concerned about her husband's physical well-being as she's making out.
No.
Walter says she's not going to get away with it. I know you're planning to off your husband. You're not going to get away with it. And she starts to get offended. So he says, look, I'm going to leave for the sake of both of us, because we don't want this to go any further than this. But then he says...
She responds, I think you're rotten. And he says, I think you're swell, as long as I'm not your husband.
It's just so many quotable lines.
Yeah.
So then he's in the voiceover then, and he's driving home, and he says he mulled it over, but then he realised she'd gotten her hooks into me.
Yeah.
So, like, he's already her bait. So then she goes to visit him at home. It's a brilliant voiceover again here, where he says that he knew as soon as the door knocked, he knew it was her.
Yeah.
Without even like, it's so good, man. It's so good. God, it's so good. So they start to flirt more, and then she starts to act seductive, and she starts to kind of give him the pity eyes, and she tries to gain his sympathy. And she basically has him on a leash, let's be honest here. He says that
literally, because she says that her husband has her on a leash,
Yeah.
and that he's very overbearing. It's very femme fatale,
Yeah.
basically. The idea that she is going to try and twist this man to do her bidding. It was a real theme of the film noirs of the 1940s, and as you said, this is kind of the one. She just slips into conversation that her husband sometimes hits her, and that he's very overbearing, and straight away he's like, overbearing? He's away. How could he be overbearing?
Yeah,
and she's like, oh, he's always, he just has me on a leash, even if he's on the other side of the country, he has me on a leash. And they kiss, which if he wasn't already hooked, he's very, 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 very hooked now. He's doomed.
Yeah, Walter then says, look, he recounts a couple of cases of wives whose husbands passed away, and the wives tried to get the payout, and the insurance companies were able to prove that the insurance companies were able to prove that it was murder. He says, look, it needs to be absolutely iron proof, foolproof. Sorry, iron proof. Don't know what I was going with there. Foolproof. It needs to be just absolutely no chinks in this armor whatsoever. It needs to be absolutely foolproof. And then she says, look, I was his wife's nurse, sorry, when she was sick. When his wife died, then he kind of came to me for comfort, and that's how we kind of got together. But she says he doesn't actually have any money since he got into the oil business, that like he's been pumping so much money in that he doesn't even have that much money. So Walter says, look, we're going to do it. I'm going to help you. And he says, I'm the only one who knows how to do it and how to get away with it, because I know the insurance business. Like, the film makes insurance sound mysterious and sexy and dangerous.
Well, he likens himself. It cuts back to a monologue again, just for the sake of a cool one-liner. But it cuts back then after he agrees to help her, to him in the office again, and he likens him helping her take out insurance on her husband to him being a dealer in a casino and robbing the house, because nobody knows the house better than the dealer himself. Basically, his idea is he knows everything there is to know about insurance, therefore only he can make a perfect plan to get away with it. And we go back, and yes, he's very much going to help her. So then the next time we see him, he actually is meeting the no first name Mr. Dietrichson, which is just kind of interesting. There's a bit of a twist, because normally in a lot of films, we would have characters who we would know who the husband is, but the wife would just be Mrs. Dietrichson.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was interesting for a 1944 film that the husband of the Femme Fatale, we don't need a first name, because who even is he? Do you know? If anything, he's just a plot point. He's not even a person.
And also in this scene, we see him acting very belligerent and very rude and very controlling towards his wife. So
and
his daughter, exactly. So it does prove Phyllis's kind of what you were saying earlier about, like, he's very mean and he's very abusive in a lot of ways. So that just gives her more kind of, it gives Walter more reason to side with Phyllis and to believe what she's saying, and that it's just so good, man.
Yeah, and earlier she said that he's only now obsessed with his daughter, and his daughter says she's gonna go skating with one of her friends, and he straight away is like, you better not be going out with that Sacchetti guy. And she snaps at the idea that she could possibly be going out with a boy, and he kind of berates his daughter. And she goes off in a huff, but she's going to go skating with her friend, I'm sure. And in the meantime, he gets the husband to sign the car insurance policy. And then again, it's just a thing. It's very subtle, but it's clever because obviously only he would be able to do something like this and be in the know because he's closed so many of these deals before. He has a second piece of paper underneath and just calls it a duplicate. But because he's already gotten him to read the car insurance, he doesn't bother to read the duplicate because you're told
I've
it's a
already
duplicate.
read it.
You assume that you've already read it. So he signs the second one as well. And the second one is the accident policy, the accident
this
insurance.
scene is so well directed. Walter and Phyllis just sharing so many pregnant pauses and so many looks together. It's just so, oh man, it's so good. Like it literally makes signing insurance documents again. I'm going to repeat myself here. It makes signing insurance documents seem dangerous and like violent almost. Oh, it's like he's a genius. The guy, Billy Wilder, is a genius, man.
He's the man. And yeah, Walter gets up and leaves, and we then talk about the oh so famous double indemnity clause, name of the movie. Basically, it's a bunch of clauses in accident insurance where you get paid double if an absolutely insane unforeseen accident happens, i.e., you fall off a train. Which is interesting because he slipped into conversation earlier, the husband this is, that he's going to meet some of his old friends from school from Stanford. And I think he was originally planning on driving down. So Walter's like, no, you
Palo
have to
Alto,
convince him to get the train down. Because if he falls off the train, that actually fits into the double indemnity clause. So you won't get 50k. You will get 100 grand for this accident.
A lot of money back in the day as well, by the way.
A lot of money now. I'd fucking bite your hand off.
No, exactly. But back then, inflation, you're probably talking like 5, 6, 7 times as much potentially.
Yeah.
So yeah, she starts to act like, oh, okay, I'll do it. Like she just has him on his strings throughout the whole movie, and he never realizes it.
Absolutely.
He never realizes, or he does realize that, and he just doesn't care because he's so down for her. Like he's just DTF for Phyllis.
I saw there's a really good a very much liked Letterboxd review which just says a cautionary tale for simps. That's all it is. That's the one-liner. Cautionary tale for simps.
Genius. Yeah.
But,
So Walter,
he gets down to his car. Walter gets to his car, and Lola's in his car, the daughter, because guess where she's going? She's going to meet Zacchetti, her dodgy boyfriend. And is he dodgy or is he not? Well, we'll find out now because we're about to meet him. And on our first time we meet him,
he's a dickhead.
He's an arsehole. He's a total arsehole. I hope he doesn't die or anything. No spoilers or no non-spoilers. I just thought I'd throw that in there. But yeah, Nino's Zacchetti. And they are going to go on a date. And Zacchetti just doesn't like Walter from the second he meets him, and he's just an arsehole to him, but it's totally unprovoked at this point.
Yeah, like as soon as he sees Lola with another guy, he just assumes the worst and he starts to act really possessive and controlling and jealous. It's it's a good way to introduce
men.
Zacchetti
Kill
as
them
like
all.
exactly. We're all tickets.
But Phyllis, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so Walter and Phyllis then they go to a market and they meet in secret. Again, they're doing this like a spy, almost like spies, like undercover agents, where like, it's so well directed, man. I'm sorry, so good. So
it is. It's really, really good.
So they're just having this secret conversation, but she says there's been a snag in the plan. He's after falling down a well and breaking his leg, so he's not going to Palo Alto after more. The trip is off. And he says, look, we're going to have to be patient. We can't just do like the whole thing is we need to be we need the double indemnity clause because that's that whole plan. We need to get paid double, so we'll do it when the time is right. We're not going to just rush into it. And then Keyes goes to visit Walter in his office and then says, look, you're the only guy here who I kind of half rate, as he said earlier. I want you to be my number two. I want you to cover the claims insurance, be my number two. And because you're the only guy here who I think actually has half a brain cell. Then he says, look, it's going to come with a $50 annual cut in salary, which doesn't really exactly appeal to Walter, I think it's fair to say. But he says, look, it's a more honourable job. and you'd be good at it. You'd be really good at it. You're the only person here who I think can do it. Just then, Phyllis calls on the phone, and Keys picks it up without even thinking. I think he's just kind of mid-conversation, and he picks it up almost like a reflex. And he passes the phone over to Walter and says, "There's a dame on the phone for you." And then Walter, once he realizes it's Phyllis, then he obviously pretends it's another woman, like a client of his who maybe he's interested in. Margie, yeah. And Phyllis then says, "Look, he's going to go tonight on the train." And so Walter's kind of trying to tell her information over the phone without obviously tipping Keys off. And she says, "Look, I love you." So that's her parting little gift to Walter, because he's as if he wasn't already
agreed to kill her husband.
As if he wasn't already on the hook for this woman. Like, that just sends him over the edge.
So he meticulously follows his timetable, as he calls it then, for the rest of the day, establishing a pretty much concrete alibi. He makes sure a bunch of people see him leaving his car to get washed, going to his apartment, staying in his apartment. So many people can account for it. He makes sure that he will find out if his phone rings, if his doorbell rings. He takes the back stairs so nobody sees him. He goes to Phyllis's house. He goes walks, by the way. He walks, but nobody sees him because he goes a certain route down an alleyway. It's very dark out as well. He sneaks into the back of the car in the garage where the lights are all off so nobody sees him, and he ducks down behind the two front seats, and he tells her, when we get to the alleyway where we're going to do the thing, and I don't mean sex, honk the horn 3 times. And she's like, okay. So yeah, she convinces her husband to come out because she's convinced him to get the train to go on this trip with his bum leg. And he gets in the car and they're driving, and he actually seems to be getting on with her. It's an interesting thing with Wilder where he kind of humanizes him a little bit. Not that like he deserved to die or anything, but he just kind of makes him not a dick in his final moments, which was an interesting touch. Because we go into this alleyway, the horn gets honked 3 times, and off screen from behind, Walter breaks the guy's neck. He's dead.
He did. So then Walter puts on like a fake cast, and he takes Dietrichson's crutches, obviously, and his hat as well, his fedora. So he's obviously,
and he's dressed in a navy suit as well, which is what he was wearing.
He's basically doing everything that he's dressing up as Dietrichson, obviously. So then, as they get off to the car and they're walking over, he gives Phyllis some instructions to what to do next. He says, "Tell her to go park by somewhere, and he'll meet her there." Yeah. So then he gets on the train, and then he's on the train, and he goes out to like the end of the carriage just outside. And then he's just about to kind of put his plan into motion, but then he sees a guy called Jackson there. And as soon as he sees him, then he makes sure to keep his back to Jackson so that he doesn't actually see his face. So then Jackson and him are making small talk, and then eventually he says, I think Jackson offers him some cigars, I think, and he says no. But
Jackson offers him a cigarette, and he says, "No, I'm a cigar kind of man myself." And Jackson goes, "Oh, do you have cigars with you?" And he's like, "Yeah, they're in the back cart there. Would you mind getting them?" And Jackson's more than happy to oblige. And when Jackson goes to get them, he jumps off the train. Now, it's only just kind of taken off, so it's not moving very fast or anything. So he's fine with the fall, if that's what you're thinking. But he jumps off the back, and he told Phyllis to flash and dim the lights a bunch of times so he could know where the car is. So they get the body, they put the body on the tracks, and they hightail it. They get to the car, and again, this is a thing that wasn't in the book. The car won't start. Just a little bit of tension, and then eventually they get going. But that was just for the film as well. And when all is said and done, they go back to his... he gets back to his apartment eventually, and he is convinced in his gut that he's done something wrong. He's convinced that he's slipped up somewhere. He goes down to the guy who was washing his car just to really reinforce his alibi and say he's going to go and walk up to the shop. And on his walk up to the shop, from then until the rest of the movie, the guy's a ball of nerves.
He says he just knew it would all go wrong, and then he says he had the walk of a dead man. Like, what a line, man. What a line.
Yeah.
So, like, we know from the start of the film anyway that it all goes wrong, because he literally goes into his office, heavily wounded. He's obviously trying to conceal a wound, and he's telling Keyes what actually happened. But yeah, just so many great lines, man. Splinter throughout. So yeah, Keyes then comes in and tells Walter that the police were happy that this death was accidental. Says he died of a broken neck. And Key stands up for Walter when their boss kind of says, their boss is basically unhappy that Walter gave him double indemnity insurance because, or gave him accidental death insurance, I should say, sorry, because obviously he means they're on the hook for a lot more money now. But Key says, look, how is he supposed to know this would happen? Like, he's just doing his job. He got a sale.
He's so analytical. He's so analytical because a lot of his reasoning is based on statistics. And he's like, statistically speaking, the chances of this guy giving this guy accidental death insurance and then him dying less than 2 weeks later are 1 in the billions.
A billion,
so you cannot blame this guy for this. And what's a really clever way as well of throwing Keyes off the scent for now is whenever the boss calls in a visitor, which is Phyllis, he is convinced it's suicide, and straight away Keyes' mind is like, right, it's obviously not suicide, so I have to break this down.
Yeah. Because their boss, whether it's because he actually believes it or because he just doesn't want to pay out, but he's saying that he doesn't believe that death is accidental. And Keyes says that he doesn't think foul play was involved, but that's all he's willing to say at this point. But then they kind of bring in a surprise, so Phyllis walks in, and obviously Walter's not exactly happy to see her because he taken by surprise. But they just try and play it cool, and Norton, who's the boss, tells Phyllis that he suspects suicide. So then she storms off when Norton tries to offer her a settlement because he's obviously just trying to save a few quid. He has no evidence whatsoever at this point to prove anything. So she does a great job then of being like, I didn't even know he hadn't, I didn't even know there was any kind of foul play suspect, and now you're telling me I might not even. Do you know what I mean? She does a great job of kind of throwing Keyes and Noir at the scent in this point.
Controlling everyone in the room.
Exactly, yeah. She's really, really smart in how she plays it. But then Keyes then rants about Norton's nonsense theory and says that they're going to have to just pay through the nose. You know it, I know it. That's why you went through the whole charade. So Keyes he just jumps to Walter's defense several times here in this scene because he doesn't think Walter's kind of getting in his eyes, Walter's getting the sharp end of the stick. All he was doing was selling some insurance, which is his job, and he's sticking up for his boy.
Yeah, because Norton says that it was definitely suicide, and he's like, okay, first of all, you've never worked in insurance in your life. You inherited this job. I've worked in insurance my whole life, so why don't you listen to me for once? That train was moving at this speed.
Yeah.
Do you know how likely it would be that a guy would fall off there knowingly committing suicide and it actually work? If you're going to commit suicide, you're not going to jump off a slow moving train.
Yeah.
You idiot.
Yeah, Keyes comes up with all these great facts and figures. Just super, super hyper competent. Like clearly just has a great grasp of things. But then Walter says after that conversation, he says, I could have hugged you, Keyes. Like he just loved Keyes even more after that conversation. And he said after that he finally began to relax and feel more confident. Phyllis then calls Walter on the phone and says, I'm kind of across the street, can I come up? And he says, okay, but don't let anyone see you. So she comes up, but when there's a knock on the door, Walter opens it, expecting to see Phyllis, and it's Keyes. So Keyes comes
great
and
bit of
says,
music, great change in the music as well there.
It's amazing.
The score by Miklos Rosa, who we've covered on the podcast before. Actually, he did Spellbound.
He's a legend.
Yeah, he did Spellbound. He did Ben-Hur.
Yeah.
I think he's got like 17 or 18 Academy Award nominations as a composer, which is insane.
He's so good. The scoring throughout is really great, but then Keyes says, why didn't Dietrichson claim for the broken leg that he suffered? That's the thing that's been bugging me this whole time. He fell down a well, he broke his leg, like he already had the insurance. Why didn't he claim for it? And Walter then is trying to flap about, I should say, and like trying to think of an answer really quickly, but you can't really think of anything. And Keyes says, no, there's something wrong here. So then Phyllis arrives, and just as she's about to walk in, she manages to hear Keyes and Walter. So she hides behind the door, and then another amazing piece of direction and camera work. And so just as Keyes leaves, he comes out the door, and then Phyllis like hides behind the door, and then she's like, she's
Yeah,
like,
Walter comes out and he opens the door, and just as a sign, she just jiggles the door back
yeah,
and forth, so he knows that there's someone behind it. It's so, but like, there's no way the Keys could have seen that. It's so clever.
And Walter just then stands in front of the door because he's a big guy. Walter Neff, like, he's a tall guy, so he obviously then that's much less chance of Keys then seeing Phyllis if Walter just stands there. So they just about manage to get away with it then because Keys leaves and they kind of breathe a sigh of relief. It's just, again, such an amazing scene. But yeah, Phyllis panics and then Walter actually calm down, so they kiss again. And then the next day then Lola turns up. Yeah,
so they kiss and he basically tells her, you're probably going to get tailed now because he's the little man inside him is really saying that it's your fault. So you're going to get tailed for this foreseeable, so we can't see each other anymore. And interestingly, in the book then, going forward, he actually then falls in love with Lola and uses them tailing her as an excuse for him to get to see Lola more often.
Nice.
But in the film, he sees Lola the next day because Lola has shown up at his office, and Lola tells him a couple of little details, nothing too important. Just the fact that she's convinced that Phyllis killed her mother, as well as her father. So, as we knew previously, Phyllis was her mother's nurse, and she said she couldn't get over the fact that one day, when her mother already had pneumonia, she got home to find her mother in bed, shaking because all the bedclothes were taken off and they were thrown to the other side of the room and all the windows were open. And it just seemed too much of a coincidence. And then when she went to close the windows and cover her mother, who shows up but Phyllis with a particular look in her eyes. And then her mother died a couple of days later from the pneumonia that she already had, which was obviously heightened from that experience. And then she said, a couple of days before her father died, she saw, with the same look in her eyes as before, Phyllis trying on the clothes she was wearing at the funeral.
Yeah,
days before her father died.
In front of a mirror, like as if to kind of practice what way she would look and what way she would kind of play it. She cries and breaks down. So yeah, she's pretty convinced that her mother killed both her mother. Sorry, Phyllis killed both her mother and her father. And obviously Walter's trying not to give anything away at this point, but he comforts her and he says, he's basically trying to make sure she doesn't tell anyone else his theory, i.e. Keys, because so he kind
Keys
of
will be on that in a second.
Yeah, exactly. So he kind of takes it upon himself then to hang around with Lola more to kind of calm her down, because he knows that if Keys gets even a sniff of this, he's going to be all over it. So then Keys comes to Walter's office and he calls Walter to his office, I should say, and when Walter gets there, he sees Mr. Jackson from the train. Yeah. And he actually says the last person in the world I wanted to see. So Keys says it's the fanciest piece of homicide he's ever seen, and he almost sounds like admiring of the person who pulled it off. Which I think makes Walter flattered, but also he just knows now. Keys knows this is a murder, so he's starting to feel the pinch, really. He says, I figured out, Walter. Dietrichson was never on the train. So he says, they killed Dietrichson, him and whoever. Phyllis and this mystery man, he says. Mm-hmm. They killed him beforehand. This mystery man got on the train. This mystery man was talked to Mr. Jackson here. And when Mr. Jackson went to get the cigarettes, or the cigars, I should say, he jumped off and then they planted the body. So literally exactly how it happened. He's so good. He's such a confident guy.
As well, he doesn't actually get anything wrong here, but the only information Jackson really has for them is it definitely wasn't Mr. Dietrichson because the guy who I saw was younger. That's the only information that Jackson gives Keys. So that's all Keys has to go off. Obviously, if he said he was a tall, built young man who looked and sounded a bit like that, obviously Keys would have been on it in a second. Yeah. And he would have been like, Walter. But no, all he tells Keys is he was just younger. This man was 51. The guy who I saw was much younger than that, maybe even 20 years younger than that. Yeah. And Keys is like, right, okay, that's very interesting. And he kind of sends Jackson on his way. And on his way, Jackson just can't stop staring at Walter. And he thinks he knows him from Oregon because that's part of his character. He just mentions that he's from Oregon in every sentence. And he just kind of fobs him off. He's like, I've never been to Oregon. I don't know you. I'm not related to the Neffs. from Oregon. Go away. And Keys is like, right, well, you can go home tonight. And he's like, oh no, I want to go home tomorrow morning. And it's just like Walter's just in the corner, like, well, we just fucking leave. Just
really
get out of here, please.
Yeah,
like the man is a ball of nerves. For literally, there's like a specific midpoint in this film. It's like Walter pre-nervous, Walter nervous. And nervous Walter is like a totally different character. He's nowhere near as cool, calm, and collected as he was in the beginning. And yeah, you can just see him dying inside in the corner of this room because this Jackson guy just won't fuck off. But he does, eventually.
Yeah, now Walter and Phyllis then the next day meet at the market, which is obviously very risky since she's being watched. But he tells her the claim's going to be rejected and don't sue, because he says that if it goes to court, more is going to come out. Like, for example, the first Mrs. Dietrichson, who you are alleged to have killed. Lola's going to get up in the stand. She's going to give all this information that she's told me, and then it's going to go from bad to worst for both of us. So she tries to persuade him to go through with it, but he's like, no, we just can't. We have to just leave it.
Yeah.
Nip it in the bud. It's not going any further than this. And then she kind of turns then. She goes, listen, we came into this together. We're going to come out of it together. And obviously unnerves him because he realizes that she's kind of been playing him for a fool. I think at this point he starts to realize it. But then he says he saw Lola 3 or 4 times that week, and seems that they've grown closer. Obviously, you said in the book it's more of a romantic thing. I think in this case, it's more like he feels regret, his conscience and guilt. Involved, it's guilt because he knows that he's responsible for her father's death, and he knows that he knows that has a big part to play in that. I mean, he was the one who actually killed.
He did murder her father. Let's not beat around the bush. He murdered her father.
Yeah, so I think it's more guilt than any romantic thing here. But she starts crying in the woods one day when they kind of go for a picnic, and she says, I think it was Nino and Phyllis. Nino was a Keddy, and Phyllis. I think it was Nino who killed her army father with Phyllis. She says that he's been going to her house every night for the past 5 nights. And Walter's, again, this is new information to Walter, so he already was getting suspicious. Yeah, he already was getting very suspicious of Phyllis. But I think this is the moment then where he's like, she's been playing me like a fiddle this whole time.
So then the next time we see Walter, he's in work. He's actually leaving work when Keyes calls him over and says he's convinced he's figured out who the man is who helped Phyllis, and they should go out for a celebratory dinner so he can tell him everything that he's figured out. But Walter kind of fobs him off then, and he's like, oh no, I need to go home and shave and get a shoe shine. I'm going out on a date tonight. And he's like, oh, Margie again. Which Walter then all of a sudden just has this horrendous, nervous gut feeling that, he's convinced at this point anyway that Keyes is onto him, that Barton's onto him. So whenever Keyes leaves, he actually goes back up to Barton Keyes' office, and he listens to the recording in his office of the last note that he took, which was in fact that Nino Zacchetti was tailed and spotted for the last 5 nights in a row, confirming the information that he, for the last 5 nights in a row, was in Phyllis's house. And obviously that would lead Walter to believe then that Keyes is convinced also that it was Zacchetti. So now he's kind of figured out.
There's also, sorry, just to jump in there.
Yeah.
Keyes in that voice memo that he listens to as well also, again, defends Walter because I think it must have been Norton who suggested putting a tail on Walter, and he's like, listen. Yeah. He kind of just jumps to his defense again and says, I've known this guy for so long, there's no way he would be involved in this. I strongly disagree with the suggestion to put him under surveillance. And then, he talks about, obviously, Zacchetti now is the prime suspect because he's been to Phyllis's house 5 nights in a row.
Yeah. And Walter feels as though maybe they're having an affair, but also he thinks she's withholding all this information from me. Therefore, I think it's time I finally get the ball back in my court. And he kind of comes up with a plan as to what he's going to do for the rest of the movie. And he goes on over to Phyllis's house.
Yeah, so he calls Phyllis and he arranges to visit her. And she says, look, I'll leave the door unlocked. Come over at 11 p.m. So, it's pretty obvious that he plans to deal with the situation, to use a Mr. Burns kind of phrase. But she obviously has plans of her own. So when he arrives, she's kind of sitting, she's after turning off all the lights, and she's sitting in the dark, and then she places a gun under the sofa. So when he walks in, he says, he tells Phyllis he's getting off and he's going to frame Katie for the murder, for his part in the murder. And he says, in fact, Nino might have actually been involved all along. Like, was he involved all along? Like, I think he actually might have been. Phyllis explains that no, what I did with Nino was I've been working him for the last few nights to get him to kill Lola. So she's been planting seeds in Nino's head that Lola's kind of been seeing all these other guys. Because she knows Nino is very much a jealous type, like we saw earlier in the film. And as soon as he kind of caught wind of that, then he'd be like, bam, he'd just go and kill Lola out of jealousy. Really dark stuff.
Very dark, yeah.
Very dark.
And he goes over to the window then to close the blind.
Yeah.
And she shoots him. Yes, with that gun she planted, she shoots him. And what's really interesting and subtle as well is he asks her to shoot him a second time. Probably similar to what happened in Where the Sidewalk Ends, where the character who's done the irredeemable thing finds that the only way out for his character and his legacy and how people think of him is if he gets shot to death by a bad guy. So if she shoots him to death, it'll probably never come out that he actually murdered Lola's father. So it would redeem him. But she doesn't shoot him the second time. So he stumbles over to her and he takes the gun off her. And he says, "You never loved me." And she says, "No, I never loved you until I couldn't fire the second shot." Oh, drama. No, he pulls the gun on her and he shoots her twice. Yeah. Nips that shit right in the bud. He's like, right, well, if you're not going to kill me, bang, bang, 2 in the stomach. I got to wrap this film up. He just fully kills her in her sitting room, shoots her twice in the stomach, lays her down, goes outside, and he sees none other than Nino Zacchetti showing up to the house. And he kind of realizes that, yes, Nino Zacchetti is an arsehole. Nino Zacchetti might even be an abuser. But Nino Zacchetti has nothing to do with this murder, and I'm not letting him go down for this murder. So he gives Nino a few quid, and he says, go down to the local drugstore and phone Lola. She wants to talk to you. And he's like, she wants nothing to do with me. And he's like, no, she does. Trust me. Phone her. Look after her.
He's like, I know who told you that, and it's not true.
Yeah.
So he's heavily hinting to Nino that he knows that Phyllis has been playing them both all along.
Yeah. So back to present day. Walter's in the office, and he makes one last request, which is that Nino and specifically Lola get looked after regardless of what happens, and he's very sorry. He's very sorry. Mr. Keyes. Oh, who's that behind him? Yeah. Oh, Barton Keyes was in the office more or less the whole time. He said, how much did you hear? And he was like, enough. Yeah, no, enough.
Keyes says he's obviously still concerned because he still likes Walter, and he's like, look, I'm going to call you a doctor. But Walter says, no, all that's waiting for me is the gas chamber. He's like, please just do one thing for me. Just let me get out here. Give me, like, I think he says an hour or whatever it is. Give me a bit of time, basically, so that I can go to Mexico, go get across the border. And Key says, look, you're never going to make it. Even if, and he would never do that, Keys, obviously, he's way far too honourable. But even if he was to allow him to do that, he's like, you're in no state to get across the border here, pal. So then Walter...
There's two great Keys lines in this scene. One of them is, Keys, I need you to let me get to the border. And he's like, border? You're not even going to make it to the lift. Because like he knows he's dying. Yeah. And as well, whenever Keys catches him, he's like, go on then, Keys, give me your honourable speech with all your $2 words and make me feel like the villain that I am. And all he says is, you're all washed up, Walter. And he's like, oh, well, thanks for keeping it short.
Yeah, so Walter...
It's so good.
I think Walter knows the game is up, but he's giving it a good valiant little effort anyway. So he gets up,
but he tries to run away.
He's staggering out to the lobby and he's staggering to the door, and he does eventually collapse. And then Keyes comes over, and Walter tells Keyes, like, I couldn't figure this. The reason you couldn't figure this one out was because you were too close. This
exchange is so good. Yeah, this exchange is so good. He goes, the reason you couldn't figure this one out, Keyes, is because the guy was too close. He was right across the desk from you. And Keys goes, he was closer than that.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck, right in the heartstrings. And then his response is, as he said earlier, I love you, Keys.
Yeah, they both tell each other they love each other. Like, that is the romance. That is the romance. Obviously not.
Fuck.
That is the bromance of the film. Like, even to the last second, Keys doesn't act betrayed or like angry. He's just so sorry and so sad that Walter
and disappointed.
Just disappointed in his friend. Like, it's such a good film, man. Yes, Double Indemnity. Watch it.
Yeah, that's the end of the movie. It's just fucking class. It's fucking perfect. It's 5 stars. Every time I've ever watched it, I've given it 5 stars. It's a perfect movie. It is my number one movie of the 1940s. There, I said it. It's the best movie in the entire decade of the 1940s for me that I've seen so far, and I've seen a good few. It is fucking perfect. The writing is perfect. As I said earlier, as I said in the Salak 17 episode, when Billy Wilder writes a movie, we cannot do the writing justice in this. Every single line is quotable. Every single line is great. Every single line is witty. So don't expect us to do it justice either, because otherwise this podcast episode would be like 10 hours long with quotes and stuff. Yeah, it's Double Indemnity. It's perfect. I love it. 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. It is just class. Film noir is an amazing genre, and this is probably the best of the lot for me. For me, it is the quintessential film noir with the quintessential femme fatale. And Edward G. Robinson, for me, is such a class actor. His character, Barton Keyes, is we are following like the villains of the piece, and he is like the protagonist, even though he's not the main character. But he is such a good foil for the two characters because he's so competent. He just gets everything. He's so interesting. And then, of course, Fred MacMurray, Walter Neff, what a performance, what a voice, what a cool guy. And also, I don't know what it is, but like him, Jimmy Stewart, whenever I see a tall guy in an old movie, I identify, because everyone was like below 6 foot back then. So just seeing him being tall and scenes, I'm like, yes, tall people being represented in an old movie. That never happens, except for Jimmy Stewart when he towers over everyone.
I'm much more to Edward G. Robinson, just the short ones. But no, it's just 3 absolutely iconic film noir performances. Like I've said, but Barbara Stanwyck is
so good.
Barbara Stanwyck is the femme fatale for me. Like there's no one can compete with her. There's a lot of great femme fatale performances. She is the epitome of a femme fatale performance.
Yes, the epitome.
Epitome, yes, exactly. So I don't know. Yeah, I
hope someone mentions it in the comments.
What epitome? Well, it's not wrong. Anyway, now look, it is my favorite film noir. Like I've seen a bunch of amazing film noirs, especially over the last month. There, like, if you want to see some recommendations, that video is up. But no, it's just an absolutely classic film. It's one of my top 3 Billy Wilder films as well. It just is a 5-star film. Like,
literally.
It's just, and actually, I say that I actually didn't give it 5 stars. I've seen it 3 times now. The first time I saw it was years and years ago, and I didn't really remember it that much because the second time I watched it, I was like, I know I've seen this film, but I can't remember. There would be scenes that I knew I'd seen, but then there was also a lot of stuff that I didn't remember. So it was really cool because it was like, oh, I'm actually kind of seeing this for the first time. That time I did give it, I think it was 4 stars, maybe 4.5. But this latest watch, I was just like, I don't know what I was thinking that second time. It's a 5-star film all over. Like, it just is a 5-star film. Watch Double Indemnity, please, everyone.
Yes, it is perfect. And the only thing I'm thinking now is, not that we've gone long or anything, but we are doing, to pull the curtain back, we're doing a double recording. And I imagine we probably won't talk about, not naming it, next week's film as much as we're talking about Double Indemnity, because Double Indemnity is one of both of our favorite movies ever. So I think we might talk about what we watched recently in next week's episode, because as I said, we are doing a double recording here. So yeah, we'll probably leave that for next week, just to kind of balance out the run times of the 2 episodes. But that was Double Indemnity, a literal classic in every sense of the word, like a perfect movie, literally perfect. It doesn't happen often where we both give a film 5 stars on the podcast. Doesn't happen often at all.
I feel like 12 Angry Men and Psycho was the only time it happened.
12 Angry Men,
Psycho.
Psycho. Yeah, that's probably it.
I
Yeah.
think that's it, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is, because the only other one you gave 5 stars to was Notorious,
Yeah.
which I gave 4.5, and then I gave
Rope, I think.
Rope and The Seventh Seal, I believe I gave 5 stars to as well. I think. Anyway, star ratings don't matter.
No, they don't.
They're a rough guide as to whether or not we loved, liked,
Yeah, exactly.
didn't like, or hated a movie. That's all they are. Don't follow them. I always find that like I'm constantly changing star ratings from like previous watches and stuff,
100%.
and then it fucks up all my lists on Letterboxd, because I've like lists of like every movie I rated 5 stars, and then I'm scrolling through and I was like, there's a 3.5 star rated movie in this. How did that? Oh my god, I gave such and such 5 stars. But anyway, stars don't matter. They really don't, especially not in wrestling either, Dave. Anyway,
Dave.
yeah, that is Double Indemnity. I feel like I've said that sentence a bunch of times because I don't know why I'm struggling to wrap this episode up. But yeah, Billy Wilder again. Who knows? We might cover Billy Wilder another time, sometime soon. Is that a hint for a noir, or am I talking about something else? Oh my god, you'll find out soon. Anyway, try and figure out what next week's episode is on our Instagram. And yeah, we'll see you then for episode 31. I'm still not naming the name of the movie. Thank you very much. I've been Harry Bailey.
I've been Shane Mulvaney.
And that was the Golden Hour Film Podcast. So long.